Today we're going to talk vehicles and fantasy flight games, Star Wars RPG. There's a lot of information here, so yes, there's going to be advice or info or whatever else that you want that you're not going to hear. Calm thine tits, we will get there. It's a big book, big books, lots of books. We'll get there. Okay, so today we're going to start off with just looking at the character sheet for this ship, which typically this would be for like your group ship. Often there's a group resource, a Millennium Falcon kind of freighter, shuttle, whatever that you all share, go on missions on. Doesn't always have to be the case. Sometimes it could be a cluster of Y-Wings or whatever else. And anyway, typically that's what the sheet is for, and there's one in the back of every book. The only real difference I can tell is that the picture changes, and of course the logo, the paint job, blah blah blah. It's all the same crap. And speaking of same crap, a lot of this stuff is gonna either be exactly how it is in the regular non-vehicle aspect of the game, like silhouettes and other stuff, but just like more of it, or it's just like slightly different, it's like on a grander scale or whatever. So like, let's start at the top. What have we got? Ship name, make, model, blah blah blah. Self-explanatory. Hard points, just like with gear, hard points are basically your ship's upgrade capacity. I mean, technically it would be a literal point that you could mount something onto, but it's not something like you have to track the actual physical location. Like, they don't go so into depth where here is a shield hardpoint, and it is a size 3, and it takes up to they don't really go into that much detail. It's just a general upgrade capacity. Each attachment is worth X amount of hardpoints, and then every ship has a capacity of hardpoints that you can put onto it. Also, when you modify it, you should be noted that the price to modify, much different, much higher, as you might imagine. I remember the first time we played this, we couldn't find it, so we just started using just the regular gear rules to modify, which is dumb, but I didn't care enough to actually find the real rules, so we just kind of rolled with it. Whatever. Encumbrance capacity, that's self-explanatory. It's the amount of stuff you can hold. Now let's move on to these stats right here, the real stats as far as I'm concerned. Silhouette. Okay, so silhouette. Similar, kind of, I mean, the same basic principle as silhouette in the non-vehicle game, but it just covers more silhouettes, obviously. The baseline, silhouette 1, that's like people size, or from Luke, too short to be a Stormtrooper Skywalker, all the way up to like a Wookiee or Trandoshan. They're all that range, that's all silhouette 1. Silhouette 0 is like roughly half that size, like your R2s and your Jawas, and it goes all the way up to silhouette 10, which originally was just for the Death Star, until they actually statted the damn thing, and now we found out it's like silhouette 20, so I don't even know what silhouette 10 is, much less 11, 12, 13, so on. Probably nothing, I guess. Some space stations. Maybe is the Super Star Destroyer in the game yet? Have I covered that? I think it might be Dawn of Rebellion? Anyway, just a few examples. Silhouette 2 is when we start getting into the vehicles, right? So Silhouette 2 ranges from like speeder bike to the snow speeder, that kind of rough range. Silhouette 3, that's typically like your fighters. They're from the A-Wing to the Y-Wing, X-Wing. The ATST also would be Silhouette 3, that sort of thing. Silhouette 4 is more your Millennium Falcons or your Outriders, that small light freighter or shuttle. I think the Lambda shuttle, that's Silhouette 4, right? Now 5, that's when you start getting into capital ships, capital class ships, and that range is from like the Gazanti class transport, or like the Rebel transport when they escaped Hoth, all the way up to like the Corellian Corvette Leia was running away at the beginning of New Hope, like that range. If you're an X-Wing player, you have probably a better idea of the range of size between those two. I think they're relatively proportional to each other. I have to stop doing this. I'm doing too much of this. What is this? And beyond that is just bigger and bigger capital ships. Now, silhouette matters because, unlike in personal scale combat, the difficulty of an attack check is not determined by range, but by the difference in size between the attacker and attackee. Basically, as you might imagine, a smaller vessel attacking a larger one has an easier time than a larger one attacking a smaller one. And there's a chart in the book, 249, 250-ish, depending on which book. I imagine it changes. Also, silhouette matters because it helps determine what a capital ship is. As I said, silhouette 5 and above is considered a capital ship, and there are special rules that go alongside that. So, for example, there's a type of weapon in the game called, well, blasters. You might be familiar, and they really are more just sort of like personnel-based weapons mounted onto vehicles. There's also like laser cannons or quad laser cannons, more X-Wing or Millennium Falcon turret type weapons, and these have special rules when being fired from a capital ship. The idea is that they're put on these ships sometimes as like anti-starfighter weapons to help make it easier to hit them, and so that changes the difficulty. Now this is only when they're mounted on capital ships, so that silhouette designation is important. Although, weird thing, I can only find that in the Edge of the Empire book, not Age of Rebellion. I don't have Force and Destiny with me, I didn't think I'd need it, but now some stuff's in this book, or that, but like, why would it only be in this book but not in this book? Is my brain dumb? Can I just not find it? Is it just in a different format, not in a special little section off the side? That's why I can't find it. Why does it not talk about starfighter defense in Age of Rebellion and the special rules that... Oh, also, there's more actions, there's more ship actions in Age of Rebellion than in Age of the Empire. Dumb little things like that I hate. Anyway, vehicle character sheet, where were we? Speed, well, that's your speed. That's the maximum speed that the vehicle can go at, and also you'll have to keep track of your current speed when you're doing the ship combat and all that stuff. You're not necessarily going at your maximum. You can, but you don't have to, and there's a mechanic that involves adjusting that. And to put it in the proper context, speed 0 will not be moving at all. Speed 1 would be a big lumbering AT-AT walker. Speed 6 is the A-wing. And so, you know, anything in between. That's sort of the upper end of the spectrum, right? A-wings are about one of the fastest ships in the game, something like that. Your heavier bomber-type starfighters like Y-wing and B-wing are 4. Regular TIE is 5. Now, I'm not going to give an example of every single one, but, you know, that should give you an idea of what the speeds mean. Sort of handling. Handling is how maneuverable your ship is. And typically, I mean, there might be some outliers. There probably are outliers, but typically this ranges from -3 all the way up to +3 and everything in between. And so what that means is that when you do a piloting check, or the pilot does a piloting check to pilot the ship, how well the ship handles is going to play a role. So it will either add that many boost die if it's a positive number, or that many setback die if it's a negative number. So really not maneuverable ship, or one that's really hard to maneuver, that might have a -1, 2, or 3, and so you would add that many setback die. But a very maneuverable ship, like a TIE fighter, that has a handling of 3, so you would add 3 boost die onto every piloting check to pilot your TIE fighter. Now I know a Y-wing is 0, so you wouldn't add any boost die or setback die. Well, not from handling anyway. There might be other things where you add boost or setback die to your piloting check. X-wing is 1, so you'd add 1 boost die, and something like your Millennium Falcon, that's -1, so you'd add 1 setback die onto piloting checks with that. And piloting checks can be done in all sorts of different ways. You know, you might have a talent that says, do a piloting check to do this maneuver, and it might help with your defense or something. But also there's just standard maneuvers and actions that every pilot can do, and they might involve piloting checks, and they'll modify your stats or the opponent's stats in some way, depending on what it is. I'm not going to go over every single one, but I might touch on a few in a later video. Armor. Armor's like your soak. On personal scale, it's just your damage resistance. That's it. Hull trauma and system strain, also very much like your wound threshold and strain threshold, and they work in a very similar way. Now, there are some slight changes, like, for example, you can do a mechanics check to heal hull trauma, but only once. It's sort of like in-field repairs. To do any more than that, you have to dock somewhere where they have all the proper supplies and all that, but, you know, you can do little minor repairs to kind of get you back on your feet a little more. Also, there are actions or maneuvers or some stuff you can do when you're part of the crew. If you're a techie on the crew, you can do some stuff to help deal with, well, it's mostly strain that you help deal with. And it's worth noting that probably because you have this extra avenue of dealing with strain, or maybe just the fact that ships are different than people, you could not use advantages to heal system strain like you could when you do a check to heal your own regular strain. So keep that in mind. And that's not the only thing that your crew can do. There's actually a whole graph of different actions that crew can do with all sorts of different checks. Like, you can even use athletics to repair instead of normal mechanics. Depending on what you're doing, like what exactly the repairs require, it could just be a matter of elbow grease and a little grit to do whatever it is you need to do. And of course there's stuff like boosting shields or jamming communications. You can have a co-pilot, which is doing their own check to help the pilot, do a leadership check to help the gunners. Well, you could be a gunner if there's turrets or whatever. So there's lots of different stuff for the crew to do during a combat encounter, but again, we'll get more into that on a later day. Okay, defense. So basically, defense comes from your shields, and different size of ships, like 5 or capital class on up. This is the other thing I hadn't mentioned yet, where whether it's a capital ship or not makes a difference. 5 or up capital class ships will have 4 different areas where they have defenses, where their shields are spread out. If you're a 4, like Millennium Falcon or less, then you just have your front shields and your back shields to worry about. So when you look at your ship's stat block, you might have port and starboard just hyphened out. It's not applicable, not something you have to worry about with your ship, like for example with this Y-wing here, but we see that we do have a 1 in both forward and aft. Right? Those are the right words? Forward and aft? I'm not a boat guy. Forward and aft, there's a 1 in each, so you have basically 1 layer of shield on each. Or that's the strength of your shield or whatever. So when someone does an attack check against you, they get 1 setback die. Now, I keep saying shields to worry about because shields are something that you can manage, or your crew can manage if you have crew. Like a Y-wing might have a second person, right? And so they could do stuff to help manage your shields, like moving shields from one, what do they call it? From one side to the other. You can move shields, and so you can double up. So you can move your shields from the forward section to the back. So you have 0 if they attack you from the front, and then 2 if they attack you from the back. So if you're being chased or whatever, or if you're doing a forward assault, you can have your shields move to the front, and so someone could be managing that constantly. Then if you have a larger ship with these 4 areas, well, you have more to deal with. And you'll notice that there's some nuance in terms of the stats of the ship. So like the Y-wing has 1 and 1, but another ship might have 2 and 1. So their forward shields might be better because maybe they're sort of a dedicated bomber and they're used to that frontal assault, at which point they can move the real shields to the forward if they really want to, but of course they would leave their back a little more vulnerable. Also, they have that flexibility. They could move 1 to the back for when they're being chased, and all the way down to just one shield, 1 and 0, like the plucky little A-wing. So their shields overall are weaker than, say, something like an X-wing or Y-wing or B-wing or whatever else. And of course, most of the TIEs, well, they don't have any shields, so they have defense 0. Now, the frustrating thing is that stuff like firing arcs, because your weapons, they have firing arcs, like forward and aft and whatever else, or if it's a turret, there's a certain range, and also like dorsal, like top and bottom. They'll say this in the weapons, or we have different shield placements, but there's no real rules that sort of account for that or make use of that. It's just basically on a whim, the GM decides, okay, well, TIE fighters come out from behind an asteroid field on your right, and oh, you didn't have any shields on your right-hand side, so they don't have any setback die because you moved them to your left because you didn't think anyone was over there. And it's just very situational, whatever makes the most sense. There's not like a set grid kind of system where you work stuff out. It's all a little too abstract and dumb for my taste. A lot of people have made like house rules and that sort of thing. Eventually we will go over like a vehicle situation, maybe talk about tips or ideas, how to tweak it or make it a little better, or we could just work with what's there. We don't have to change everything. That is it for today. If you like this video and want to see more, come back tomorrow. It's daily December, so we got a new video for every day for all of December. See you then.